My name is Jeremy Wade. I'm an explorer and fishing detective.
I'm always on the lookout for mysterious fishy tales that don't quite add up.
Careful, careful, careful! Woo, that was a big one.
And one such story that I've just heard about from the far wild east of Russia has really snagged my interest.
A fishing trip gone horribly wrong. 3 men mysteriously disappear on a remote and wild river in Russia. It has all the hallmarks of a classic river monsters investigation. Telltale clues that this was not just a simple fishing accident.
I believe they encountered something in the water, something big enough and terrible enough to cause the death of not just one man, but of all 3. October 2009, the Amur River in the far wild east of Russia.
3 men set out on a fishing trip.
Ну хоть улыбнитесь, что ли? Такие прям серьезные.
It's the kind of trip they've made many times before.
Only this time is different.
Удачи вам, ребята! О, как молодцы.
This time, they never return. A year later, the bodies of 2 of the men are found, or what's left of them. Long dead, apparently drowned. The 3rd body is never recovered.
Over the years, there have been many rumors of disappearances, deaths, and monsters connected with the Amur River.
But it's impossible to get any more information. It's as if there's something in the water that they don't want the outside world to know about.
So I've had nothing concrete to go on. Until now.
Russia is a place I've never been to before. It's the largest country in the world, and the Amur is the world's 10th longest river. At 2,700 miles, it's nearly twice as long as the Colorado. The region is home to some of the largest land predators, tigers and bears. But what's in the river? Legend has it, the river was carved out by a huge black dragon as it dragged its body from the sea. And something still lurks in its depths, killing fishermen to this day. I want to find out what it is. What I need are facts. And after 3 days of traveling, I arrive at the town of Nikolaevsk, near the river's mouth. Once a wealthy place, it's now more like a ghost town. I'm looking for details of what exactly happened to those 3 fishermen. In this remote location, where few outsiders travel, getting information is not going to be easy. So I go fishing at a small feeder stream on the outskirts of town. People in isolated communities can be suspicious of strangers, so I'm using myself as bait. To see if the novelty of an outsider might tempt somebody to talk.
I think I just briefly hooked something.
But I don't want to strike too early and reveal that it's information I'm after, not until I've gained their trust.
This one. Okay, blue fox. Okay, thank you.
Fishing, for me, is often about thinking outside the box. My efforts are rewarded. I get an invitation to join them inside their home. But first, I want to prove that I'm capable of bringing a fish in.
Whoa.
But wherever I fish, I seem to run into competition I wasn't expecting.
Hey, I've got a dog here. I don't, no. Don't want the... In the Amazon, I've had to compete with caiman for the fish on the line.
And in Alaska, a bear took my fish. But a dog is a first.
But I don't want a dog with a hook in its mouth. That would not be fun. What a lovely fish. Lovely chum salmon, beautiful coloration. Pink band down the side, those dark spots on the back.
I'm told this river is stuffed with salmon.
Interesting. I think you're starting to see that sort of metamorphosis that they undergo when they come in the rivers, that sort of hook on the lower jaw, hump of the back there. A lot of the locals are keeping these for the pot. I think while nobody's looking, I might slip this one back there.
This catch is significant because no monster can exist without a food supply. This abundance of salmon would fulfill that role. I join Igor Poroshin and his friends inside to warm up. And as we talk, I'm hoping I'll get the information I have come here for. Does anyone know of the fisherman who disappeared?
Второй день. 2 дня.
Other fish?
За 2 дня. Ну, я, можно сказать, не старался.
Bay of Luck, Paruski.
After some general fishing chat, Igor tells me a key fact about the 3 men who vanished.
Well, I've managed to find out a little bit more. The fishermen actually weren't from here. They were from a town a little way further up the river.
With some borrowed transport, I head west to the town of Innokentyevka. With fewer than 5,000 people, this fishing community is one of just a handful along this stretch of the Amur. There's a tough mix of races and cultures, all brought together for one reason: fish. With such a small population, it shouldn't be too hard to find someone who knew the fishermen. The man I meet is a Neve, one of the many tribes of indigenous people who originally inhabited this region. His name is Edward, and his cousin was one of the fishermen who died that day. Treading gently, I ask about what happened.
На второй день.
His cousin went fishing with 2 other people a couple of years ago, and they disappeared. 2 bodies were actually found the next year, but the other person hasn't been found. Very quickly, I eliminate some of the more obvious possibilities. So this really sounds like something that doesn't have an easy explanation. One of the guys on the boat was inexperienced, it was his first time out, but the other 2 people were very experienced, knew what they were doing. The boat was designed to be on that kind of water. It's a seagoing boat, and the weather was nothing out of the ordinary, and 3 people somehow disappeared. I ask what they were fishing for, and he's curiously evasive. They were clearly not fishing for salmon. This strange conversation leaves me with more questions than answers. I get the feeling that something's being concealed. You show me where it happened. He does, however, agree to show me on the map where they would have been heading. Well, he's shown me where it happened. I think what I've got to do now is actually get out on the river.
I have a suspicion that what they were fishing for may somehow be responsible for this tragic event. There's something lurking in the river that no one wants me to know about, and I won't leave until I've caught it. My investigation needs to be thorough. Once all the obvious possibilities have been crossed off, I can take a hard look at the suspects in the water. And since I've never fished here before, I've no idea what's down there.
Well, this is pretty much where the boat went down, and just looking around, this isn't the open sea, this is the mouth of the river. It's relatively sheltered. Not only that, I'm thinking that if the people on board were even semi-competent swimmers, they would have had half a chance to reach the shore.
The knowledge of these fishing grounds would have been handed down through generations.
There was something else involved, not just the weather and the water.
So what they were fishing for has to be somehow responsible.
Some fishermen have just stopped by and they've got something in a net that they want me to see.
They've asked not to have their faces shown. Further evidence that something suspicious is going on here. Perhaps they were poaching, but what for?
This is a seal that's got drowned in the net.
I wasn't expecting this. I had it in my mind that I was about to see a fish. But could a seal be the monster of the Amur River? Bearded seals average 600 pounds. Tangled and thrashing in a net, they are easily big enough to drag a careless fisherman to his death.
So there's lots of them around, apparently, but mainly out in the mouth of the river.
I ask if seals cause fishing accidents. They reply that they've never heard of that happening.
The thing about nets is they are quite sort of indiscriminate. I mean, they're obviously fishing for a large animal the size of those meshes.
Far too big for salmon. So if they weren't trying to catch seals or salmon, then what were they fishing for? Again, I can't seem to get an answer. On the surface, people are helpful, but on another level, no one is talking. This place has a veil of secrecy that I need to penetrate. Fish markets usually provide me with information. With none around, I head instead to the fish processing plant. This place is where all the salmon from the surrounding area are shipped in, but this year, something worrying is happening.
We're actually getting some salmon unloaded off this truck here. There have actually been so few salmon in the river this year that the only fish coming to this plant are actually trucked in from the mouth of the river.
This is the main employer in the area, so it offers the best bet for finding some information about the monster. But instead of finding answers, my suspicions only deepen. People are friendly enough, but again, no one seems to want to give anything away. Just what is going on? So once again, I use myself as bait to try and gain their trust. There are fish off the factory's dock, but I'm not seeing any monsters.
It's not quite. It's a bit roach-like, about 4 or 5 ounces. And that was caught on a hook with a little bit of silver paper attached.
Finally, the plant's manager tells me of a fish that lives just off the dock. A fish big enough to destroy fishermen's tackle, so it's never been caught. I take up the challenge. If this story is right, I'm not taking any chances. I'm using my monster rod, a wire trace, and line with a breaking strain of 200 pounds. This place would certainly appeal to a monster, an easy, vast and ready supply of fish scraps to feast upon. But with all this free food, will it find my offering appealing?
net.
It's another surprise.
I'll try and swing this in. Basically, putting a lump of dead fish out by the waste chute at the fish factory. And I'll just see if I can just swing this in. That's a catfish. That looks incredibly like a Wells catfish, but Wells catfish don't exist out here. But that looks like a very close relative anyway. Wells catfish grow very big, 200 pounds or so. If these things grow to that kind of size, that could be the culprit. That could be the fish we're looking at.
I've caught giant Wells catfish from the River Ebro in Spain. Fish so big, they nearly pulled me into the river.
So this is a predator, and the reason it's hanging out here, I guess, is because of all the food, all the dead fish. And with the annual run of salmon every year, I don't know, it's possible that this species could grow to an interesting size.
It turns out that there are two species of catfish living in the Amur, and one is potentially a true river monster. Called the Soldatov catfish after a famous Russian fish biologist, it's said to grow to a similar size as those infamous Wells catfish from Europe that I've investigated before. But very little is actually known about it. Could a giant catfish, fattened on the fish waste from this plant, be the monster of the Amur?
But it's nice to catch a fish, and a predatory fish, out of this river.
I've little doubt that what lives here and smashes the fisherman's tackle is a giant overfed one of these. But is it responsible for the disappearance of 3 fishermen? To get more information, one of the lads tells me about a man called Misha. He's a hunter and fisherman, and I'm curious to know what he thinks about the possibility of a supersized catfish.
Ну, случай неординарный. В общем-то, это обыкновенная рыбалка на реке Амур. Довольно-таки крупных размеров.
This is a story that Misha heard about on the river here. There were 2 fishermen, went out netting one day, nothing out of the ordinary about that. But what happened is that they got a very big fish in their net, and he said this was about 700 kilos, about 1,500 pounds, very large fish. And they were trying to pull the net in with the fish in it, so they were over one side of the boat. This fish was so big that it actually flipped the boat, and they fell into the cold water. This was in late autumn, and the water was so cold that they actually died.
It's the conclusive evidence I needed that there is a fish big enough here to drown fishermen.
This fish they had in the net, what kind of fish was it?
But what he starts to describe to me is no catfish. It's something even more monstrous.
Хвост у нее также вот как у акулы примерно.
And he says it's a very big fish. This one about 1,500 pounds. Very powerful fish, and it's got a big mouth.
1,500 pounds is a colossal size.
Can you give me some more details of this fish? Can you describe it to me?
То есть хвост у нее также вот как у акулы примерно. Но у нее немножко, значит, что шкура у нее тоже такая шершавая.
But the fish he's describing is not a catfish. It's something else entirely.
По спине, по самому.
What he's saying is that in body shape, it's very reminiscent of a shark, even though we're talking about a fish here that lives up rivers. And he says especially the tail, that is quite shark-like. But it's got, running down its back and down its sides, it's got rows of spikes, and he says they're very sharp and you can hurt yourself if you come into contact with those. And it's got a big mouth. This is a predatory fish that normally feeds on other fish, on smaller fish. And it's also got these feelers hanging from its snout. And
I put all of that together, and to me, that says sturgeon. It doesn't sound like any sturgeon I've heard about before. This fish they had in the net, what kind of fish was it?
Это очень большая рыба, которая водится в Амуре. Значит, это калуга.
Finally, I have a name for my culprit. Kaluga. A monster fish that has killed fishermen in the past. Could the three men have been drowned trying to wrestle a huge sturgeon into their boat?
Рот большой, потому что...
A 1,500-pound monster would surely be the fish of a lifetime. But can I catch one? At least now that I know what I'm after, I can prepare accordingly. Sturgeon have long, sensitive nasal feelers. So rather than a wire trace, I use a thin, super tough braided line that's harder to detect.
From my previous sturgeon fishing experience in the US, I know that fish, well not just sturgeon, all fish will hang out in deep water. If you've got a scoop on the bottom, you tend to get food with the current coming down and it deposits at the upstream end. It sort of tumbles around in a sort of a vertical eddy, and that's the place where any fish would naturally hang out to intercept food coming down.
So we spend the next couple of hours trying to find this type of underwater feature.
It's often said that only a line in the water catches the fish. If you haven't got a line in the water, you haven't got a chance of catching a fish. That is true up to a point, but I would rather spend an hour or two finding the exact spot where the water does actually drop off into the deep than just anchoring up anywhere and chucking a bait out. You're fishing much more effectively if you just have a couple of hours in the right place than spending all day in the wrong place.
Using a depth finder, we finally find the ideal place to start fishing.
What I've got here is one of the hooks that they used to use for Kaluga in the old days. For comparison, this is what I'm using. The thing is though, when you're fishing a fixed line, as the poachers do and as people used to in the old days, the fish can exert an awful lot of force on that hook. There's no give in the line is attached to a tree or something like that.
I've investigated stories before that show the pull a large sturgeon can exert on a line. In one case in Alaska, a white sturgeon dragged a tree stump weighing hundreds of pounds into the water.
Because I've got a reel, if that fish is exerting a lot of force, I just let it go under resistance. So using a reel, you should never get the same amount of strain on the hook as you do on a fixed line. So that's why I can get away using a finer, thinner, weaker hook, although that's still very strong for what it is. So I've got my hook tied on, and this is what I'm using as bait.
Salmon roe. This won't attach to the hook though, so I'm going to improvise using some nylons. This will allow me to have a small bag full of eggs on the end of my line.
I'm just going to squash some of these eggs in here, not all of them. That will just create a bit of a scent trail. The great thing about a river, as opposed to a lake, in a lake you sort of get a cloud of scent around the bait. In a river you get a nice trail which can stretch off maybe hundreds of yards downstream, and fish which have very sensitive sense of smell, they can find that trail and they'll follow it upstream until eventually they come to the bait. So you're sitting there, there's nothing happening on your rod, but there could be fish at that very moment working their way towards the bait.
Out here on this vast river, the dangers are tangible. It's incredibly deep, and the current is stronger than it looks. It's a place that can and has swallowed up fishermen and left little trace.
Bump on the bottom in a sec. Well, I can just feel that bumping on the bottom. Bump. Bump.
Sturgeon have been on Earth for 200 million years and have hardly changed since the time of the dinosaurs. Individuals can live as long as 100 years. Knowing what I know about sturgeon, I'm preparing for anything. I've caught a 300-pound white sturgeon in Oregon, which took me over half an hour to get in. White sturgeon are huge, but Kaluga apparently can get even bigger.
There it is. There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go.
White sturgeon can weigh an enormous amount, but Kaluga apparently can weigh even more. The biggest Kaluga on record tipped the scales at a staggering 2,205 pounds, bigger than the heaviest recorded white sturgeon. They have the potential of being the biggest river monster of all time. The salmon row hasn't worked for me so far, so I'm going to try a change of tactics, which is all to do with the Kaluga's unique mouth. Most sturgeon species have a mouth shaped for feeding on the bottom. But the Kaluga is unique in the sturgeon world. It's an active predator. With a forward-opening mouth, it hunts salmon and other fish, engulfing them in its cavernous jaws.
Just going to try something a bit different. Going to try an artificial lure. Because the Kaluga is a predator, it eats small fish. I'll put something on which, well, that's going to vaguely resemble something alive down there on the bottom. It's sort of a caricature of a fish, this, really. I'm going to let it fall down to the bottom and we're going to drift with the current, and I'm just going to lift the rod up and down. And so this is just going to flutter, particularly this tail. It's going to flutter in the water, and it should attract just the movement of the vibration. It's the kind of thing that will attract the attention of a predator.
Suddenly it strikes me that there are no other fishermen out here. And now I find out why. River police. I'm politely told that fishing for Kaluga is illegal. If I had caught anything, I'd have been in serious trouble. Just as I'm starting to make headway in this investigation, this is a real blow. Here, there's no concept of catch and release. I have to stop fishing. This would explain why people haven't been talking. They were breaking the law. Why are people willing to risk their freedom just to catch a fish? To unravel this mystery, I go to talk to the head of the Wildlife Protection Authority in this region. His name is Valentin.
Good day.
Can you tell me, are there many in the river?
Поймали 10 тысяч особей. Документы
He tells me the Amur was once full of these giants.
Отправить вместо
In the estuary, Valentin recalls seeing Kaluga jumping out of the water, and sometimes up to 20 fish at a time, up to about 1,000 pounds each.
I've heard of sturgeon jumping out of the water before, and if one lands on a small boat, it can have devastating results.
There are stories of boats being hit, sometimes turned over, and one incident that he experienced himself, he was in a small boat that had just left the large ship and they'd only got about 30 yards. They bumped into a big Kaluga in the water, and his colleague Yuri actually fell out into the water because of the impact. The situation in the Soviet area is that there was a ban on fishing for Kaluga, but in the 90s, with the collapse of the USSR, this region saw something of a free-for-all, and apparently just Kaluga came under relentless attack.
The Kaluga has nearly been wiped out.
Why is it that people keep fishing for them? What makes it so valuable, so attractive to the poachers?
увидел первый раз в 92 году. Цена черной икры была $2000.
Just getting my head around the numbers here, the thing that's driving this whole situation is the eggs of the Kaluga. This is a type of sturgeon, and it carries caviar, about 13 to 14% of the body weight of a mature fish. Mature female fish is caviar. Apparently today in Moscow, 1 kilo, 2 pounds of caviar are going to bring in about $500 US.
To a fisherman, this is like striking gold.
For a salmon fisherman here, just one Kaluga could bring them the same money as working for 3.5 years salmon fishing. So, I mean, you can absolutely understand the temptation. And given this level of motivation, Valentin is just not optimistic at all about the future of the Kaluga in this river. It does seem very much as if the fish here is doomed.
Later, I find out just how bad this problem really is. Because of the high value of caviar on the black market, poaching is run by mafia-style organised crime. People wouldn't talk because they were scared of the repercussions. Could the 3 fishermen who disappeared have come across one of the last giants, and in the ensuing battle, lost their lives? And perhaps the biggest question, are there any Kaluga sturgeon left in the Amur at all? I'm finding myself in a difficult situation. I want to see if there are any monsters out there.
But the Kaluga is protected. There's a possible way around this. People here have said that I could go and catch one by accident, but technically this would be poaching, even though I'd be putting the fish back alive.
But to catch one like this would be morally wrong.
I'm halfway around the world, I've got the boat, I've got the fishing gear, I've got the food, everything I need, and I'm just so reluctant to give up having come this far. So I've been looking into ways, is there any way I can just circumvent this? And I think I found a way.
Valentin has put me in touch with a team of scientists here monitoring fish stocks on the Amur. They've allowed me to join them. This is my only chance of seeing a Kaluga, if of course there are any left. But the first thing I witness is not a fish, but clear proof that poachers haven't given up on trying to find Kaluga.
Two boats going at high speed, one after the other on the other side, and apparently that is a police boat chasing some poachers. And at the moment, I think the poachers are getting away. The distance between the two boats is lengthening. The thing about the value of caviar is that with the profits that you make, you can afford a faster boat than what the police have got.
Out here on this vast river, trying to catch anything is going to be hard enough. But something as rare as a Kaluga is going to be almost impossible. But then they say that about many fish I go in search of. Normally I fish with a rod and line, but these scientists are going to use a drift net.
A lot of people who fish with line all the time have this idea that fishing with nets is very easy. You just put the net out and you empty out the river, but it's actually quite technical. If there's trees, other snags on the bottom, they'll catch onto those. But also on the boat, you're feeding it out. It can catch onto bits of the boat, hence the cloth there, but also bits of clothing as well, buttons, things like that.
I'm only allowed to do this because I'm with a licensed scientific team.
Well, the net's now out, and it's now just a waiting game as we drift down the river. There's about 200 yards of net. We're in 80 foot of water, and what happens is that the net actually goes all the way to the bottom, and the current takes the top line, the float line, and because that's flowing faster than the water at the bottom, the net is actually coming down at an angle. So it's moving like that, and the fish that we're after are going to be sort of towards the bottom of the water.
But as we wait for a chance encounter with one of these rare giants, I'm about to witness another side to this disaster.
This is actually quite spooky. It looks like a migration of fish. There's all these fins sticking out of the water, and what it is, it's salmon upside down
and their tail fins breaking the surface, and they're all sort of drifting down with the current, and they're all dead.
Of course, it's normal for salmon to die after spawning. I wonder if that's what's happening here.
And even more of what we're seeing too many of. Dead salmon, and a lot of them now in fairly advanced stages of decomposition, which sometimes makes them fall apart and nicely go through the net. Other times you just get endless smelly fragments just all over the place. Just seeing all these dead fish. I mean, it's unpleasant just from a visceral point of view, just the smell of death. This one is pretty horrible. That was a male fish. It looked like that fish hadn't spawned.
And the more we set our nets, the more I get the feeling that something out of the ordinary is happening here.
Some of the ones that have actually broken open because they're so decomposed, they've still got eggs in, they've still got lots of eggs in. So this isn't normal. Normally dead salmon have no eggs, they've sowed the seeds of the next generation, but this isn't a normal situation. There's something going on here.
Back at the scientists' research vessel, taking a break from netting, I find some salmon still alive close to shore and decide to perform a test using a thermometer borrowed from the scientists.
So there's a very dramatic difference in water temperature. I could feel it with my hands, but according to the thermometer in the stream, the water was 10 degrees Celsius.
49 degrees Fahrenheit.
At the mouth of the stream where the salmon are milling around is 15.
58 degrees Fahrenheit.
And then here at the side of the river where the dead salmon are is 25.
76 degrees. That's a massive overall difference of 27 degrees Fahrenheit.
I mean, that's just such a difference, and the difference it makes to the fish. Again, very graphic, the difference between being alive and being dead.
The scientists tell me that the temperature in the river should be about the same as it is in the spring-fed stream. But before I arrived, this region had the biggest heat wave in living memory. This high water temperature is causing the salmon to die. If these fish are to stand any chance of surviving long enough to spawn, they need to be able to get up the stream and into cooler water.
Now at the moment there's not enough water, but I suppose it's possible that if there's some rain, all they need is literally a few inches and they can run up here. There might be a suitable breeding site up there might not be.
I'll just follow this stream up a little bit, see where it goes. Because what the salmon don't know, and what I don't know, is whether this stream is actually any use as a spawning ground for them. There's actually one fish that's made it up here. I don't know if there was a bit of rain or something at some point, but that fish doesn't look like it's going any further. It's run aground, it's just feebly flapping its fins.
At the moment, all these salmon are destined to die. And because they won't spawn, there will be no next generation to come up the river. Is this disaster a result of global warming? The scientists don't know, but without a food supply, it's another nail in the Kaluga's coffin. I ask Victor, one of the scientists, when was the last time he saw a monster Kaluga from this river?
So Victor grew up on the banks of this river, on the banks of the Amur, has been fishing here since he was a small boy. The biggest Kaluga he's seen was about 1,300 pounds. The biggest one he's caught himself was about 1,200 pounds. And a fish that length, he says, is about 16 feet long. And he remembers, this is interesting, fishermen are like this, he remembers the exact date that it was caught on, 6th of August, 1981.
It's been more than 30 years since he caught a monster Kaluga here. But he goes on to tell me a story that could provide a clue to explain the mystery of the missing fisherman.
About 40 years ago, there was a fisherman from his village who went out one day setting hooks. Very interesting technique. These hooks have no bait on them. Then fish will actually bump into the line, get caught up. And this fisherman went out on his own to pull in the line, and he didn't come back.
When they recovered the boat, they were able to piece together what probably happened.
Yeah, thank you.
The man must have been retrieving the long line. Long lines can be hundreds of yards long, with hooks at regular intervals. Somewhere on the line was a Kaluga. As it felt itself being pulled towards the surface, it panicked. In a flash, the tables were turned. As the fish took out more line, several of the already retrieved 6-inch sharpened hooks stuck the fisherman. Unable to free himself, the man was dragged to his death. A search party was sent out the next day, led by the fisherman's brother, who knew exactly where the boat should have been.
They found his line, and attached to the line was a very big fish, a big Kaluga, and he was attached to the same line. And one other detail from that story that just makes you aware of the strength of the fish. Although they found the fisherman floating on the surface, they never found his boat, and so from that they deduced that the fish, possibly with a blow from its tail, broke the boat, sunk the boat, and then the current just took it away.
This story has eerie echoes of a case I investigated in the Congo, looking for the suni, a giant catfish. But even the biggest of these would be dwarfed by the Kaluga I'm hunting for here. That fish pulled a man out of a small dugout. Longlining is illegal on this river. But if the 3 fishermen were poaching, they may have been using a long line as well as a net, which could have been doubly dangerous. In the chaos of a huge thrashing Kaluga, were they all dragged to their deaths? I have proved in the past that a man in the water is no match for a fish not even half his weight. So a 1,500-pound angry giant could easily take out 3 men. But are there any giants left? We set out again in one of the small fishing boats to try and net one, just like those dead fishermen did a couple of years ago. The difference is our intentions are not to kill the Kaluga, but a huge thrashing monster doesn't know that. Because I might come into contact with a sturgeon, I'm going to have to be careful. Just by handling it, I could get injured.
Sturgeon, actually, they have these bony scoots down the back and down the sides, and on a small one, they've got quite a sharp point on, but by the time they reach a big size, those points have gone, they've been worn down. So gloves, very necessary for handling particularly small sturgeon.
We set net after net, each drift and retrieve taking over 2 hours. After being on the river for half a day, we finally net our first sturgeon. It's not a Kaluga though, but an Amur sturgeon.
Small Amur sturgeon. So this is the ordinary sturgeon, and the mouth on this it's like a telescopic tube that comes down. So that's not really the mouth of a predator. They will eat small fish when they reach a large size, but it's more for just sort of sucking up crustaceans and things like that, smaller food items on the bottom of the river.
We carry on setting nets in the hope of catching a rare Kaluga.
One thing that demonstrates is that when you're netting, the choice of mesh size is actually very, very critical. We're working with sort of like 3-inch square meshes here, and which seems to be the perfect size for these smaller sturgeon. Apparently in the old days, when the Kaluga were running really big in this river, they used to use a mesh where each square of the net was about a foot square. Gives some indication of the size that these fish used to grow to.
Even though our mesh size is smaller, it's still capable of tangling a giant Kaluga. We've nearly exhausted all the spots on this part of the river, but just before moving off, bubbles breaking the surface are the sign of something big coming up from the bottom.
Oh, more bubbles here. That is our big fish.
After weeks of searching, I've finally caught my first Kaluga.
So this is it, the Kaluga sturgeon of the Amur River. Now, this is big by normal freshwater fish standards, but by the standards of what this fish can potentially grow to, this is a small one.
But I've never been so happy and relieved to find a fish alive.
This fish would actually overpower you. This fish, you know, you would not be able to hold your own in the water against this. And a big one of these, 15 foot long, I can well believe now the stories of those smashing boats, sending them to the bottom so they're never found again.
I'm afraid that the last of the giants may be gone. But as fortunes can still be made from the fish that remain, this story can only end in tragedy for the Kaluga, and sometimes for the fishermen who still hunt them illegally.
Despite having heard those stories of deaths and disappearances, the real victim is actually this fish, which we've fished very hard for. Well, this is the biggest one that I've seen. This thing's been hunted really to the edge of extinction, all for the sake of its valuable eggs. That's really very sad, and I really hope that this population comes back.
But even in the face of this human onslaught, nature has a surprising ability to cling on. As this rare living dinosaur returns to the deep, I find something in the boat that gives me a glimmer of hope.
It's quite something when I think that I've heard so much about this fish, particularly in terms of the very large size that it can reach. Over 1,000 pounds, 15, 16 foot long. And to think that when I put this back over the course of many years, it could grow big enough to drag people out of boats. But here it is, a perfect miniature Kaluga.
Without doubt, it's my smallest ever river monster. But in terms of the significance and hope it carries, it could be the biggest of my entire career. Into the hole, which just keeps on going and going. Visibility is zero, and as I feel around, something bites my hand.